This is the Sigma 28-45, and it's the world's first 1.8 full-frame zoom lens Sigma has done a really good job with. So in today's video, I want to go over the lens, my experience using it over the past month, and let you know the pros, the cons, and who I think this lens is for. First, I want to give a special shout out to B&H Photo because they sent out this lens for me to do this video and some of the other videos you've seen on the channel. They made these reviews possible, so I do want to thank them. And if you are interested in purchasing this lens, make sure to hit the links in the description below. When it comes to the 28-45, it's interesting because it's a very small focal range, but it does give you three different primes in one. It gives you a 28mm, a 35mm, and a 45mm, which is very close to 50, but it is 45, so it's a little bit wider. But you get f1.8 at all focal lengths, and you also get amazing image quality at all focal lengths, even wide open at f1.8. Sigma has really outdone themselves on this lens, and in today's video, I'm using the L-mount specific version because I'm using it with the Blackmagic Cinema camera 6K full frame. When it comes to the image quality, it's a little bit better than the 18-35, which this is supposed to be the spiritual successor to. It's definitely a little bit better than the 24-35, which a lot of you have been asking me to compare this to, which I do have that video coming up on the channel soon. This lens is $1,350. This is pretty expensive, a lot more expensive than the older Sigma zooms. It is mirrorless, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It really depends on how you look at it. You don't have to use an adapter, which is a good thing, but at the same time, you are locked in to whatever mount that you're using. So if you're using all Sony cameras, not a big deal. Using all Lumix cameras or L-mount cameras, not a big deal. But if you're someone like me who I've got the Red Komodo, which is an RF mount camera, I have the Blackmagic Cinema camera 6K, I have this FX30 that we're filming on right now, they're all completely different lens mounts, and the older lenses like the 18-35, 24-35, they're EF mount. So I can use them across all of my camera bodies and kind of get that uniform image quality, where this is stuck just being on the L-mount bodies. And it's $1,350. It's a lot more expensive. The front filter thread on this lens is 82mm, which is pretty standard for lenses of this size and being full frame. So it was really nice. I already had a variable ND filter that was 82mm. I was able to stick it on here. Just like all of Sigma's newly released lenses, it does have an area on here so you can change the aperture on the bottom or just leave it on the A mode, which will let you change it in camera. You can also take this button right here, where you can choose if you want it to be a clickless or click aperture. So if I do that, all of a sudden, as you hear, it adds clicks to the aperture. But if you want it to be a little bit more smooth or audio is a factor, you don't want that to show up in your audio, you can change it to clickless, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's nice, smooth, you don't hear it. There's this little button right here that is a lock, and what this lock is for is actually for the aperture ring. So if you click that lock, it'll prevent you from moving the aperture out of auto mode, or vice versa. If you turn it off and then you put it into the mode where you can switch your f-stop and then turn it back on, it'll prevent it from you being able to go into the automatic mode. So it'll force it to where you always have to go to the lens to change your aperture f-stop. It's nice to have. I actually didn't realize it was there when I first got the lens, and it's a cool feature because occasionally I've been using this lens, maybe it's been in a backpack where it actually ends up going to one of the manual f-stops and off of automatic, and it's because I didn't have that lock on. So now that that lock is there, I just do it, and when I put it in my bag, it won't move. So that's a really cool addition to this lens. Now there are two custom buttons right here and here on the lens. When it comes to Blackmagic cameras, you're not really going to be able to use them, at least at this time. For at least the L-mount version, there is a L-mount Sigma dock that if you plug into the bottom of the L-mount right here, you can do some customizations through your computer to customize how fast you want the focus to go, custom buttons. There's a lot of customizations that even Sigma has been offering on the EF glass that I've been using for years with their EF dock. So if you're going to buy this, at some point, definitely look into the L-mount dock. It's not really that expensive, and it really is going to help you, especially if you end up buying more than one Sigma L-mount lens. As far as the focus ring is concerned, the L-mount specific version is a linear focusing system. That means unlike the Sony version of this lens, no matter where or how fast you pull the focus, the focus is going to change based on how far you pull the focus. In the Sony version of this lens, if you pull the focus a little bit faster or a little bit slower, it's going to change how fast the focus actually pulls. So when you're using cameras that don't have autofocusing systems like the Blackmagic, and maybe you're gonna put this lens on something like a follow focus system, maybe you're gonna put it on a DJI RS3, RS4, it's nice to have a linear focusing system. The push autofocus on this lens is fantastic. It really gets me, I would say 9 out of 10 times, it pretty much gets me right in focus where I need to be when I hit the push autofocus button. There's only been a few times where it hasn't. The other thing with focusing is the focus breathing. It's not completely eliminated, but compared to pretty much all of my other lenses, this is the best in class for a zoom lens that's really not a cinema lens for focus breathing. It is very minimal. Now let's talk about size. This lens, it's not the biggest lens I've ever had, but it isn't a small lens. Compared to other lenses like my Sigma 18-35, my 24-35, this lens has this little extra bit right here that you'll get on the 18-35 or the 24-35 if you use an adapter. If you put this lens in any case that's carry-on compliant or any backpack, it's gonna end up taking more room because it's a little bit too long to stick in a more efficient way to pack. You're gonna have to put this lens in a little bit of a longer way. So a good example is on one of my backpacks you can see here, I have the lens in a much longer configuration than the Sigma 24-35, which as you see with the 24-35, I could fit maybe 6 of those lenses or more in that backpack. Because of how I needed to put this 28-45 in, this lens is almost taking 50% of the bag where I can put lenses, camera bodies, whatever. That was a big deal when it comes to traveling. So I think anyone who travels, you're gonna be bringing less lenses if you do bring this. Now, this lens is supposed to take up the space of 3 different variable lenses. So if you're only bringing maybe 2 lenses, like a telephoto lens, and this is your general purpose lens, it's not gonna be a big deal. But if you're going on a shoot and you need to bring a backpack, Pelican case, whatever it may be, you are gonna take up more space with this lens. And it's crazy to think that just this little addition of the bottom does change the way you have to pack your bag. There is that to consider, that this lens is not quite as versatile. And so that leads me into, who is this lens for? Because as I said, this lens is insane image quality and it's really good for the price, but it is more expensive than a lot of other lenses out there, and it has some of those trade-offs. I think this lens is going to be for a select market of videographers, wedding filmmakers, cinematographers who are maybe more on the budget end, and you are okay with getting closer to your subjects if you need better background blur. This lens is going to be really great for that kind of video work, but I don't think this lens is going to be for everybody, especially at the price. I think if this lens was maybe like $500 cheaper, it would be a little bit more of a no-brainer. But I think because of where this lens sits price-wise, its limited focal range, as great as it is, it does limit who is going to be able to make use out of this and really make it sing in their video workflow. So that's really my only negative thought about that. Otherwise, this is a really fantastic lens. Now, since B&H let me borrow this, I don't know if I'm gonna go and purchase this off the bat. I may wait 6 months to a year, see how the used market goes, and maybe buy one for my Blackmagic down the line, especially now that I have the 24-35. I think if you need a lens like this and you're working in video, this is a really great lens. Although this can be used as a studio lens and the image quality is fantastic, I would only buy this to use as a studio lens if you're using it for other purposes. I would not just buy this as a studio lens. I think something like the 18-35 if you're not on full frame, or the 24-35 if you are on full frame, you get a lot more bang for your buck. Another con of this being a mirrorless lens versus EF is if you're using something like a Red Komodo or Canon RF camera, Sony camera, there are variable ND filter mounts made to go from EF to the mirrorless mount that you don't have to have an ND filter on the front of this lens that you can't use because this is a mirrorless mount lens. And that's going to be more and more common. You know, EF lenses are being phased out. I get it. That's why we're not really going to see an EF mount version of this lens. But it is worth noting because even for me in the field, when I use my Komodo and my Sigma 18-35, having that VND filter adapter makes my workflow so much quicker. It actually makes the red more usable for me, whereas the red in the past was kind of hard using outside of narrative work, just because I would have to either put on filters into the matte box, or I'd have to screw on ND filters, or of course, have to have the screw on front VND filter. And the VND from Canon, although it's not the best, I was never, cranking it all the way down, so it really did help with the 18-35, especially when I wanted to shoot wide open. I mentioned earlier that the focal lengths on this lens are a little limiting. And part of the reason is at 28 millimeters, it's just not quite wide enough. I don't need wider than 24 on full frame, but I do need 24. The 45, I don't quite mind as much, although it would be nice to go into 50. It's such a minuscule difference. It's not a huge deal breaker for me, especially if you just get a little bit closer into your subject, you can get that really nice background blur. It's just not, again, quite wide enough, and I think that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of users, especially at the price of this lens. Just like the 18-35 and the 24-35, when you're zooming through the range, there are no external parts moving. So on gimbal work, that is really nice because for the most part, you're not going to have to rebalance the gimbal anytime you maybe want to go from 28 to 45, vice versa. It's nice to have, specifically for the gimbals. When I'm using this on a tripod, it doesn't really make a huge difference, but it is worth noting. Now, I planned on doing more with this lens, but unfortunately two things happened this month. I was supposed to go into production on a show, and I was going to use this lens on that show, and that ended up getting pushed back to pretty much January. But I didn't get to bring it on any gigs, which was unfortunate because I would have liked to use this in a real world scenario on gigs, because I think that's really the kind of filmmaker, videographer, cinematographer that's going to pick this up. I think working filmmakers, cinematographers, videographers, those are the types of video professionals that this is going to kind of be a no-brainer for. But if you're doing maybe only YouTube, or you're more of a hobbyist, I would say, where in the past the 18-35 would make sense, this just doesn't make as much sense for the price. But I do think it is a very fantastic lens, and as I said, I will pick this up eventually, just not quite right now. But if you have any questions about this lens, as I said, I'm doing a comparison with the 24-35. I have done a comparison with the 18-35, although that was using the Komodo with the 18-35 and this on the Blackmagic. Let me know in the comments below. If you got knowledge and value out of today's video, please make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. And until next time, my name is Chef Fagien. Thank you for joining me as always, and I will catch you in the next video.